Hi guys. Okay, for this session of Flipping the Classroom, I'm going to teach you how to quote from a text in your essay. As you write your essays for your novels, you are going to be expected to use evidence from the text to support your thinking. We've talked about this a lot during discussion, but now you need to be able to do it in writing. And that means that sometimes you're going to have to quote something from the text to use as evidence in your writing, and I want to make sure that you know how to do that. So one of the questions you might have is, what do I have to cite? You need to cite any words or ideas or phrases that are not your own. If they're not your own words, you have to give credit to the author who wrote them. And what we're going to focus on today is anytime that you use a direct quotation from the text in your own essay, you have to cite what page it came from. So here's an example down below. The giver tells Jonas, "Having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change." What do you notice about the way this citation looks, about how I quoted directly from the novel The Giver in this particular sentence in an essay that I would write? Take a look. What punctuation marks do you notice? You should say that one of the things that you notice is this comma right here. You have to use a comma to separate what you're writing from the quote. So anytime you're introducing a direct quotation that a character said, you're going to use a comma right before it. Another thing that you should notice are the quotation marks. That you put quotation marks at the beginning of the text that you are quoting and also at the end. This tells your reader, hey, all these words in between these quotation marks, they're not mine. They came from this text that I'm talking about. And then the last punctuation mark you notice is the period that goes at the end of the sentence. Here is something that, do you know what this is? This is a page number that the quote came from. You put your page number in parentheses, inside these two parentheses. That tells your reader, if I wanted to go to my copy of The Giver and turn to page 155, I would find this quote on that page. And that's giving credit to the author who wrote it. Something you need to pay attention to is that this period goes after the page number in parentheses, not over here at the end of the words. So when you're citing a quote, the period goes here at the end after the page number. Okay, this is a particular kind of format for giving a citation or recognizing where you got some information from, and it's called MLA format, Modern Language Association. Here are some things you need to know. When you're doing a citation, when you're giving credit to an author, you need the author's last name and the page number or the page numbers where you found the quotation or the phrase. In this essay that you're writing, you're only going to be talking about one text, one novel. And in your introductory paragraph, you will identify the title and the author at the very beginning of your essay. Therefore, you only need to put the page number where the quote can be found in the actual text of your essay. You don't need to keep mentioning the author's name because we know you're only talking about one author and you mentioned who that author is in the very first paragraph of your essay. So you always need to show the page number where you got the text from. Here's an example of using a quote inside of a larger paragraph and how I would give credit to the author. There are many examples of injustice in the community, but the most severe occurs when Jonas witnesses his father release the twin. As Jonas realizes that his father has just killed this baby, Jonas feels, quote, a ripping sensation inside himself, the feeling of terrible pain clawing its way forward to emerge in a cry. This is the turning point for Jonas, and he knows that he must finally stand up against the injustice. Do you notice anything that looks a little bit different in this quote than the other one that I showed you. Look at punctuation. Hopefully you've noticed that there is no comma after the word feels. And you might be a little confused about that because I just told you you have to have a comma. Remember what I said though earlier. You need to have a comma after your writing and the quote if the quote is dialogue. If you're quoting something that a character said, you need the comma right before the quotation. In this case, Jonas didn't say this. The narrator tells us that Jonas feels a ripping sensation inside of himself. And so I'm weaving this in to my paragraph as a detail, but I'm directly quoting it from the text. So I can't pretend that I wrote these words myself. I can't take credit for it. I have to show that actually I'm borrowing language that the author wrote herself. So in this case, because Jonas isn't saying these lines, this is narration, I don't need a comma right here. Another thing you might notice is that this time, the page number comes at the end of the paragraph, not right here after the quote. That's because I'm continuing to weave more of my own thoughts. This last sentence here, this is the turning point for Jonas, and he knows that he must finally stand up against the injustice. That's my own thought to kind of show you why this particular quote is important. So in this case, because I'm going on and I'm saying some more important information about this quote, it's good to put the page number at the end of this paragraph. Your reader will understand that this page number is directly referring back to the quoted text. Okay, I want to talk to you now about something I call quote and run. If you've heard of a hit and run car accident, then you know that a hit and run happens when a person who's driving a car hits somebody who's walking or in another car and then runs away, drives away, doesn't stay. That's how it feels sometimes when students put quotes in their writing. It feels like you just dropped it in and then you took off and you changed your topic, or you're not really talking about the quote. So your quotes from the novel, they actually need to be woven into the text of your essay. You need to make the quote a part of your own sentence. Your sentence should read smoothly from the start to the finish. The quote should not seem to be dropped from the sky, and your reader should not feel like the victim of a hit and run. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. The first example is what I want you to do. This is not a quote and run. In the first example, I have actually woven the quoted text from the novel into my own ideas. As Jonas separates from the community, he is able to feel emotions more completely. During his escape, Jonas wept because he was afraid now that he could not save Gabriel. His love for Gabriel is clear when we learn that he no longer cared about himself. So you can see in the quotes, those are the pieces I borrowed from the novel that the narrator says, and I give you the page number here at the end. But you see how the things that are not in quotation marks, my own words, they help the reader of my essay understand why these quotes are important. They make it obvious to the reader of my essay what I want these quotes from the novel to show, what I am using them to prove. You see here in my last sentence it says, his love for Gabriel is clear when we learn that he no longer cared about himself. I'm telling you in my own words that the whole reason I'm including this quote, he no longer cared about himself, the whole reason I'm including that is because it shows you how much he loves Gabriel. Now, down below, I've used the same quotes in the same kind of a paragraph, but I'm not using my own language to connect them or to show why they're important. This feels like a quote and run. This feels like I'm just dropping in quotes because my teacher told me I needed to quote something from the text, but the second example down here, after it says don't, it's not connecting any ideas. Let's look and listen to the difference. As Jonas separates from the community, he is able to feel emotions more completely. He wept because he was afraid now that he could not save Gabriel. Jonas loves Gabriel. He no longer cared about himself. Now you might look at that and say, oh, it's not so bad. Like, I kind of know what she means. But remember, powerful communication is clear. Your reader should never have to try to figure out what you're saying or what you're trying to prove. Take a minute and read both of these again and see if you can feel the difference. The first one should feel more smooth and it should be crystal clear what I'm trying to say. Read them to yourself. Okay, so the important things to remember when you're using a quote from a text in your own writing: punctuation. You put the quote in quotation marks, you put the page number in parentheses, and the period goes after the page number, not inside the quote. The second thing I want you to remember about using quotes is not to quote and run. And this is a difficult skill and it's going to take practice, but I'm going to show you lots of examples like this. You want to weave the quote into your own writing and make sure that you put your own writing in there to explain why this quote matters. Don't just drop quotes in or sprinkle them around throughout your writing without connecting them to your main idea. You have to do that. It's your responsibility as the writer to make sure your reader clearly understands the connection between the quote and your main point that you're trying to make.